Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. I pulled up to the house, the one I'd left behind 10 years ago, but it didn't feel like home. Not anymore. The place had been polished to perfection, a glossy sheen of familiarity hiding whatever had changed. My parents had invited me for a welcome home dinner, but it all felt too rehearsed, like they were just waiting for the script to play out. The moment I stepped inside, my sister Lacey's arms were around me in a tight, too perfect hug. She pulled back with this shocked smile that made my skin crawl. The thing was, we'd been texting, she knew I was coming. But here she was, acting like she hadn't spoken to me in months. The hugs, the forced enthusiasm, every bit of it was an act. It was clear she wasn't thrilled to see me, and then, of course, there was Jared. He was here too, sitting at the edge of the table, barely looking at me. His eyes darted to the floor like I wasn't worth meeting. But he was sitting too damn close to Lacey. Too close. Dinner was set on the patio, lit just right for the gram. The candles, the wine glasses, the perfect plates, nothing felt genuine. Jared pulled out a chair for Lacey, then slid into his own seat, the tension between us thick enough to slice with a knife. Lacey, in her usual sing-song voice, mentioned she was applying for a job at Jared's firm. "Everyone's so supportive," she added, looking around the table. They nodded like she'd just made the greatest decision of her life. I took a sip of my drink, holding back the sarcasm that clawed at my throat. I raised my glass and offered a toast. The clink of my glass against theirs was hollow. The silence stretched long before they swallowed their wine, eyes darting like they'd just seen something they didn't want to. "Cheers," Lacey chirped, eyes a little too wide. I barely made it past the sliding glass doors when I heard them. My mom's voice, low and steady, almost too calm. "It's better this way." She was always the outsider. My feet froze in place, just beyond the threshold, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to storm out there, confront them, demand what they meant, but I didn't. Something told me I wasn't ready to hear it, whatever it was. So I kept moving, into the house, my hands shaking as I shut the door behind me. The air inside the house felt wrong. Still, quiet. Lacey wasn't at the table anymore, but I could hear her humming softly from the kitchen, her voice a little too cheery. My mug was in her hands, the one I'd gotten when I left for training, the one I'd kept through everything, even when I was miles away, sleeping in barracks, and feeling so far from home. I went to the living room, where everything looked the same, but it didn't feel that way. The photos that had been on the walls for as long as I could remember were now arranged differently, like someone had come through and rearranged every memory. I knew that wasn't possible, but the feeling was there. I didn't exist in this house anymore, at least not the way I used to. I went upstairs, pulled open the door to my old bedroom, and froze. The space was gone, just gone. The bed, the posters, the stupid clutter I'd left behind in high school. It was all replaced with neatly folded linen stacked in every corner. The closet was full of towels, sheets, the sort of stuff you forget even exists until you need it. When had I been erased? I stood there in the doorway, the emptiness pressing in on me, squeezing the air out of my lungs. The room where I'd laughed, cried, and cursed the world was now a forgotten closet. A voice from behind me, too chipper, too much like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "You should come downstairs. We're going to watch a movie." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Lacey's voice, the way she tried to pretend like everything was fine, like nothing had changed, made my blood run cold. The house was too small for the distance between us, too loud in its silence. It wasn't just the room, it was me. I was the one who didn't belong anymore. "I'll be fine," I said, more to myself than to her. I took one last look around the room. As I turned to leave, I saw a glimmer of light on the console table in the hallway. Jared's phone, sitting there, unlocked. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't. But I did anyway. The screen flashed with a message from Lacey. "He's home? Be ready." My stomach twisted, a knot forming deep in my gut. I swiped up to read the next one. "He's not. She's." I slammed the phone back down on the table, my heart racing. My head felt like it was going to explode, like 1,000 thoughts were all rushing to the surface at once, and I couldn't grab hold of a single one. I walked away, my hands shaking, my mind spinning. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The house was too quiet, too full of things that didn't belong to me anymore. Lacey in the kitchen, humming. my favorite mug in her hands. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. When I closed my eyes, I saw the empty space of my old room again, the closet where I used to sleep. And I wondered, for the first time in years, when exactly it was that I stopped being me to them. I didn't sleep much that night, not with the weight of everything pressing in on me. So by morning, I was already itching to get answers. I found Jared in the kitchen, leaning over the counter with a cup of coffee in hand. He didn't look up when I entered. "Hey, Jared," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk?" He glanced at me, just a quick flick of his eyes, then looked away. "I'm swamped. Need to catch up on some work," he muttered, already turning toward the door like he was in a rush. I wasn't letting it go that easy. "You've got a minute?" He jogged past me, brushing my shoulder like I wasn't even there. "Maybe later," he called over his shoulder, and that was it. The anger surged in me, but I swallowed it down. He didn't have the guts to face me. Fine. I wasn't going to beg him for anything. Dinner that night was a celebration. For Lacey, she'd officially landed the job at Jared's firm, the one I'd spent the last few years working for, the one Jared had practically given her on a silver platter. Mom went on and on about how proud she was of Lacey. "She's the heart of the family," she said, her voice full of that same false warmth she always wore around Lacey. I couldn't look at her, couldn't look at any of them. Jared didn't speak. He just stared into his glass, quiet as a ghost, the perfect picture of someone trying to disappear. I raised my glass, my fingers tight around the stem, not caring if they noticed. "Cheers," I said, the word coming out bitter. My smile was sharp, like I was showing my teeth instead of a greeting. Lacey, ever the sweet one, played her part perfectly. "Thanks for introducing me to Jared. Remember? You were the one who thought we'd hit it off." Her voice had that saccharine sweetness I used to hate, the kind that was so fake it made me want to gag. I let her words hang in the air for a moment before the memory hit me. The night Jared and I first met, how he showed up at my door with a pie, something about it being his mom's recipe. I'd laughed and told him he was insane for bringing a pie to a military base, but he'd smiled and said he couldn't stop thinking about me. I'd been flattered. We'd sat on my porch, sharing that pie, and he'd promised he wouldn't leave without me knowing how much he cared. A pit formed in my stomach. I set my glass down with more force than necessary. "When did this start?" I asked, looking straight at Lacey. "Before or after I left for deployment?" The table went silent. Everyone went still, like I'd thrown a grenade into the middle of them. Jared's eyes didn't meet mine. Lacey's face was a perfect mask of innocence, but there was something behind her eyes, something I'd seen before, a flicker of something that told me she knew exactly what I was asking. It was Mom who spoke first, her voice sharp, the kind of tone she only used when she was trying to shut me down. "You've had your time, Emma. It's Lacey's turn now." Lacey's smile tightened, and for a second, I saw it, the smallest hint of triumph behind her mask. The words stung, more than they should have. I wanted to scream, to tear it all down, but I couldn't. I didn't have the energy to keep fighting them all. Not tonight. I picked up my glass again, my grip so tight it threatened to shatter. There was nothing left for me here, nothing but the cold, hollow feeling of betrayal, like they'd been slowly erasing me from this life, their life, piece by piece, while I wasn't looking. The smell of coffee and something burnt hit me before my eyes even opened. I groaned, rolling over and reaching for my phone. But when I blinked the sleep out of my eyes and saw the time, my heart skipped a beat. It was almost noon. I stumbled out of bed and walked downstairs. But what I saw when I reached the living room stopped me dead in my tracks. The front door was wide open. Officers, uniforms dark and stiff, were milling about, talking in low voices. My mother was pacing near the door, her hands wringing in that way she did, when things were about to go from bad to worse. Lacey was sitting on the couch, mascara streaking down her face, sobbing like the world was ending. Jared was there too, shirtless, looking dazed, his eyes unfocused as he slumped against the cushions. He looked like he'd been dragged through hell and left to rot, but none of that was what made my stomach drop. It was the way they all seemed so calm. Too calm. Like this was just another day. I walked in, not sure what to say, but needing to know what the hell had happened. Lacey's sobs hit me like a slap. "I found him in my bed," she wailed, her voice a mix of disbelief and fear. I screamed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want it. The officer standing nearby glanced at her, then back at Jared. What happened? He asked, though the question was more out of habit than concern. Jared rubbed his forehead, his expression blank, his voice thick like he was still half asleep. I don't remember anything, he mumbled, shaking his head like it was some kind of excuse. I couldn't take it. This wasn't some mistake. Something was wrong. I felt my jaw tighten as I stepped forward, my voice low but sharp. You think he sleepwalked into your room, Lacey? I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Lacey froze, eyes wide. She glanced at Mom, who was still pacing, and then back at me. The officer didn't respond, just glanced around the room like this was some minor family squabble. Mom stepped in before anyone could say more. Don't ruin things, she said, her voice cold, hard, like a final warning. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw the flicker of something. Fear? Guilt? But it disappeared just as fast. She straightened, smoothing her hands down the front of her blouse. Everything's fine now, Emma. You don't need to make it worse. I was done holding it in. My eyes shifted to Jared, who was still staring at the floor like it was the most interesting thing in the room. What's wrong with you? I demanded, stepping closer. How could you let this happen? He blinked, finally looking at me, but there was nothing behind his eyes. Nothing. Just a fog, a vacancy that had never been there before. Did you do this to me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt the words cut through me like a blade. Did I do this to him? I stared at him, open-mouthed, struggling to make sense of what he was saying. I couldn't even respond. It wasn't me who had lost their damn mind. It wasn't me who had done something I couldn't remember, and yet he was asking me if I was the one who had done this to him. The officer didn't seem interested in getting to the bottom of anything. He shrugged and jotted something down in his notepad, his eyes flicking between us like he was just waiting for the moment to be over. Just a family matter, he muttered, and that was it. I was ready to snap, to scream, to call bullshit on every last one of them. But then, I felt Mom's hand on my arm pulling me back. Go upstairs, she ordered, her voice clipped. You're not helping. I shook her off but didn't speak. I wanted to tear into her, into all of them, but I held back. For now. Later that night, after everything had settled, if you could even call it that, Mom came to my room. The door creaked as she stepped inside, and I didn't bother to look up from where I was sitting, staring at the wall. You're leaving, she said, her voice low, but her words sharp as a knife. I suggest you do it quietly, or it'll get ugly and you'll be dragged through the mud. The choice is yours. I didn't answer. She lingered in the doorway for a moment, but when I didn't move, she finally left. The door shut with a soft click, and I was left there in the quiet, the weight of her words sinking in. I couldn't believe it. They'd all let this happen. Let Jared slip away without a single question. And now it was up to me to pick up the pieces. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. Every breath felt like I was suffocating, trapped in a place where no one saw me for who I was. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the lies, was too much. I needed to get out, find something solid, anything that could help me make sense of what was happening. So I left. I drove without much thought, just knowing I had to go to the one person who might be able to help. Tasha. She was sitting at her cluttered desk when I walked into her office, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and old books. The air felt thick with the scent of papers, electronic devices, and whatever mystery Tasha had in her files. She looked up when I entered, a quick flicker of recognition in her eyes before she set her pen down. Thought you might need this, she said, handing me a dusty cardboard box. Her voice was low, like she knew the weight of it before I even opened it. I glanced at the box. It was old, scuffed up with age, but the name on the label made my throat tighten. Grandma. I took the box from her and set it down on the small table beside me. What's in it? I asked, though I knew it had to be something important. It felt like the last thread of anything real I had left. Found it in storage. Figured you'd want it. Tasha leaned back in her chair, studying me with those sharp eyes of hers, waiting for me to open it. I lifted the flap of the box, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. Paper, leather, and something faintly like lavender. The box was full of journals, old notes, and a USB drive that caught the light. The label on it was simple, but it stopped me cold. Inheritance. My heart slammed into my chest. This wasn't just a collection of old family stuff. It was something more. I pulled out the USB and noticed a folded piece of paper tucked inside the box, a letter from Grandma. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. If they silence you, dig. I stared at the words, trying to understand. Had Grandma known? Had she already seen what was coming? Is this... I trailed off looking at Tasha. She nodded, her eyes steady. Yeah, it's worth checking. Let's see what's on that thing. I plugged the USB into her computer, the machine humming as it processed the file. Tasha's fingers hovered over the keyboard as the folder opened. Inside, there was a single document, updated will. My pulse quickened as I clicked on it. I scanned the text, and it hit me like a punch in the gut. Everything was left to me. My grandmother's estate, her savings, her house, everything. I felt dizzy. My hands were still trembling as I read through the legal jargon, but it was clear. The will I had seen in court was a fake. It had been altered. The document I was looking at now was the real one, dated just months before Grandma passed. I didn't know what to say at first. I felt numb. This was the proof I needed. It wasn't just Jared and Lacey conspiring to screw me over. It was my entire family, using my grandmother's death to wipe me out of the picture. Tasha reached for her phone. "We need a lawyer," she said, her voice flat, matter of fact. "Someone who can handle this." I didn't hesitate. "Get Carmen," I said, the name leaving my mouth without a second thought. Carmen had been a lawyer I'd worked with before, someone I trusted. Tasha dialed the number, her eyes not leaving me as the phone rang. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. This was real. This wasn't some bad dream. When Carmen picked up, Tasha wasted no time. She filled her in quickly, telling her about the altered will, the evidence we'd just found. Carmen's voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "Get me that document and I'll have my team start working on it immediately. This is criminal, Emma. We'll take it from here." I nodded, even though Carmen couldn't see me. I wasn't going back without a fight. Not this time. The file was now in my hands. I felt like I'd just uncovered a massive lie, and the weight of it was more than I'd expected. But it was mine now. And if I had to burn everything down to get what was rightfully mine, I would. I stood up, clutching the papers, ready to face whatever came next. "We'll fight this," I told Tasha, my voice steadier than I felt. "We'll make them pay." She nodded without a word, but I could see the determination in her eyes. I wasn't alone in this anymore, and that made all the difference. Carmen didn't hesitate. By the time she'd finished reviewing the will, the truth was undeniable. "It's authentic," she confirmed, her voice sharp and clear over the phone. "The one you saw in court, it's a forgery. And the rest of it, it's a mess. Jared's involvement? This is much worse than we thought." I could hear her flipping through pages in the background, her fingers tapping against the file. "There are NDA violations all over this," she said. "Jared's signature, Lacey's secrecy about their relationship, it's all here. That's enough to void the employment agreement. You've got leverage." A lump formed in my throat. They'd been lying to me, to everyone, twisting everything until it fit their narrative. "Send the cease and desist letters. Start contesting the estate," I told her, my voice firm, despite the storm that raged inside me. It felt strange to say it out loud, but there was no turning back now. "Do whatever it takes." "You're not alone in this," Carmen assured me. "I'll get to work right away." I hung up the phone, the reality of the battle we were about to fight setting in. It was no longer just a family feud. This was war. Tasha was sitting at the desk, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she began to work her magic. The screen lit up, and soon anonymous posts started circulating online, cryptic yet full of weight. "A family's golden girl with a rusted crown," one read. "Not everything that glitters is gold," said another. They were subtle, but I could feel the shift already. The seeds of doubt were planted, and they'd grow. I leaned against the desk, watching the posts gain traction as they spread, picked up by more and more people. The comments were explosive, half skeptical, half furious, all hungry for answers. It felt like the walls around me were starting to close in on Lacey and Jared. But I wasn't done. I had to take it further. The next day, Lacey posted a response. I watched the video, her face streaked with tears, her voice shaky as she begged for grace. The kind of fake humility that made me want to throw up. She talked about how difficult it had been for her, about how she was just trying to make things work, and how everyone should be kind to her in this difficult time. I couldn't stop myself from rolling my eyes. Grace? She'd been playing everyone for years, and now she was asking for mercy? I didn't bother replying. I didn't have to. The silence was enough. My next move would speak louder than anything I could say. I let the posts keep growing, let the online conversations swirl. If the truth was out there, it would find its way. Tasha and I sat in the dim light of her office, the hum of her computer filling the space between us. My phone buzzed with notifications. People were sharing the posts, commenting, questioning what they knew. I could feel the change in the air. The pendulum was swinging, but Lacey wasn't done. She had to push back. And the way she tried to twist the narrative, make herself the victim, it pissed me off more than I expected. But I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of my response. I don't need to say anything, I muttered, more to myself than to Tasha. It's all coming out. Tasha shot me a glance, her fingers pausing over the keyboard for a second. No need to play nice anymore, right? Number. No more nice. It was clear now. This was no longer about getting answers. It was about making sure no one could ignore the truth. And I wasn't going to let anyone hide behind their lies. The war had started, and I was ready to fight. It had been a few days since the post started to spread. People were talking, yes, but I knew we needed more. A statement, something that would make them stop pretending. I wasn't going to let Lacey keep playing the victim, letting the world believe the lies she and Jared had built for years. That's when Tasha found the files. She'd been digging into the mirrored drive from one of my grandmother's old computers, and there it was, buried among old pictures and tax forms, backup files. Tasha pulled them up one by one, her eyes scanning the screen, before her fingers froze on the keyboard. Holy shit, she muttered, her voice rough. I leaned over her shoulder, trying to see what she was looking at. There were videos, 3 of them, each one worse than the last. Tasha clicked on the first one, and the image that popped up made my stomach drop. It was Lacey, sitting in front of a camera, laughing. I can't wait until she flips out, Lacey said, her voice all sweet and innocent like she was just talking about a bad haircut. I mean, seriously, she's going to lose it when she finds out. It'll be so good to watch. I didn't know whether to scream or throw up. The cold, calculating way she'd spoken about me, like I was some kind of joke to her, hit harder than anything I'd felt yet. I'd never been so disgusted. The second video was even worse. My mother, her face tightly controlled, leaned toward the camera. I bribed a clerk to delay the will reading. It buys us time, she said, her voice a low whisper, like she was afraid someone might hear. I could hardly breathe. It was all falling apart, piece by piece. Mom wasn't just complicit. She'd made this happen. Every move they made was part of some grand scheme to shut me out and keep the money for themselves. But the third video? That one nearly shattered me. Lacey was sitting on the same couch from the other videos, but this time her eyes were darker, more dangerous. She looked directly at the camera and smirked. We drugged him. He'll never remember, she said, her words slow, deliberate, like she was enjoying the power she held over Jared. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The proof was right there. They'd drugged him. It explained everything. The fog in Jared's eyes, the confusion, the memory loss. They had used him, just like they had used me. I reached for my phone, dialing Carmen's number before I even realized I was doing it. Carmen, I said when she picked up, my voice shaking with rage. You need to hear this. I sent the files to her, each video more damning than the last. It didn't take long for Carmen to call back. This changes everything, she said, her tone sharper now. This is criminal. We'll need to move quickly, Emma. There are charges to file, and we'll need a media strategy. Are you ready for this? The weight of what was coming crashed down on me. There was no going back now, but I wasn't scared. I was beyond that. I had nothing left to lose. I'm ready, I told her, my voice steady. Let's do this. Tasha and I spent the next few hours preparing. Carmen's team was already on it, contacting the right people, building the case. But we needed to control the narrative. The media would have to hear from me directly. I knew that. I couldn't let them twist it into something it wasn't. I sat in front of Tasha's camera, my heart pounding in my chest, my palms slick with sweat. She gave me a small nod, hit record, and left me alone. Hi, I said, the word feeling foreign in my mouth, like it didn't belong. I cleared my throat, trying to find my center. This is my voice, I continued, looking straight into the lens. I won't be erased. Not this time. What they did to me, what they've done to so many people, they won't get away with it. The words were simple, but they felt powerful, each one like a weight lifting off my chest. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everything they'd stolen. I hit stop on the camera and sat back, letting the silence wash over me. It was done. There was no turning back. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. Carmen sent the documents out. Everything, the will, the video files, the proof of manipulation. By the time Dana, my college friend turned journalist, posted the footage online, it was already out of control. The world was seeing what I had lived for the last decade, seeing the lies, the betrayal, the way they'd painted me as the villain in a story I never asked to be a part of. The video went viral within hours. It was everywhere, on every news site, every social media feed, people sharing it, commenting, dissecting it. My phone didn't stop buzzing. I couldn't keep up with the messages, the notifications. It felt like the whole world was watching, waiting for the next move. Jared was suspended from his job, the company distancing themselves from him faster than I thought possible. But it wasn't enough. He didn't deserve just a suspension. He deserved to be held accountable for what he'd done, for everything he had taken from me, from all of us. But Lacey, she went into full damage control mode. Of course she did. The next day she went live on her Instagram, her face streaked with tears, looking like she was the one who'd been wronged. She sobbed through the video, blaming me for everything. "She left us," she wailed. "She turned her back on her family. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted things to be normal again." Her voice shook, but it was all a performance. She was trying so damn hard to pull off the tragic, helpless act. But the public wasn't buying it. People saw through her. Comments flooded in, ripping her apart. People started posting old photos of her, pointing out the inconsistencies in her story, the lies she'd told. The image she'd so carefully built started to crack. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth was already out there, and the world was turning against her. Lacey's stream ended with her begging for forgiveness and grace, but the damage was done. She was trending, but not for the reasons she wanted. The comments weren't filled with sympathy. They were filled with mockery. People were calling her out, accusing her of being the real villain. I let her drown in it. Then Carmen called, her voice sharp, urgent. "It's time. We've filed the legal papers. The estate's yours, Emma. You're the sole heir." I leaned back in my chair, trying to take it in. The years of watching them take what was mine, of fighting for scraps, it was finally over. The house, the money, everything my grandmother had left behind, it was all mine now. It was a win, but it didn't feel like one. It didn't fix anything. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel anymore. I had won, but I hadn't gotten back the one thing that mattered. I hadn't gotten my family. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail from an unknown number. I almost didn't listen to it, but something pulled me to it. I hit play. "Emma," Jared's voice cracked through the speaker. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this. I didn't know what I was doing. I was lost, and I let them pull me in. I was weak. I pressed the phone to my ear, listening to his words as they bled out, each one more pathetic than the last. I don't know how to make this right. Please, if you can find it in yourself to forgive me." The message cut off, and I stared at the phone for a long time, my hand shaking. There was nothing to forgive. It was too late. I hit delete, the sound of it like a final nail in a coffin. I had spent so long pretending that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance things could go back to the way they were. But Jared's apology, just like everything else, felt like it was happening to someone else. Not me, not anymore. The phone sat silent in my hand, and I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for what I'd lost. I was fighting to take back everything they'd tried to strip from me. They had stolen so much, but they couldn't take this. The truth, I wasn't done. Not yet. The courthouse felt too quiet, too formal. Everything was too sharp, too cold. The walls, the floors, the judge's bench. I could feel the weight of the room pressing in on me as I walked in, Carmen at my side, the original will tucked tightly under my arm. Lacey and Mom were already sitting at the front, dressed in black, like mourners at a funeral. But they weren't mourning. Not really. They were playing a part, just like they always had. Lacey's face was a mask of practiced grief, and Mom, well, she just looked like she was trying to hold it together, even though I could see the cracks in her composure. The judge entered, his steps echoing through the silent room. He didn't look at me right away. He just took his seat, adjusting the papers in front of him, like he was preparing for the performance he knew was coming. And that's what this felt like, a performance. Only this time, I wasn't going to let them control the script. Carmen stood first, sharp and confident, as usual. She walked up to the podium, a calm presence in the storm of what was about to unfold. She pulled out the updated will, the video evidence, all the financial documents. She placed them in front of the judge, her voice steady as she began to lay it all out. "This is the authentic will of Emma's late grandmother," Carmen said, her tone carrying across the courtroom, "and it's been proven to be altered and suppressed by the opposing parties. The defendant's actions, illegal and manipulative, are evident in these documents." The judge nodded, his expression unreadable, as Carmen continued. One by one, she presented the video evidence. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on me, and for a moment, it was hard to breathe. But I had no choice but to keep going, to see it through. The first video played, Lacey, in her own words, joking about how I would flip out when I found out what they'd done. The room was so quiet, I could hear every gasp. The second one, my mother, talking about bribing a clerk to delay the will reading. And then the final video, the one that made everyone hold their breath. Lacey on screen, saying it so casually, "We drugged him." He'll never remember. There was a collective intake of air from the room. You could feel the shift, the shock, as the words sank in. Lacey's carefully constructed world, her perfect image, was falling apart in front of everyone. The gasps echoed like a storm, and I saw her face go pale, her mask cracking for the first time. But it wasn't just her. Jared was sitting behind her, his face completely drained of color. Jared. He stood up, his hands shaking as he faced the judge, his voice barely audible as he admitted it. "I knew," he said, his words hanging heavy in the air. I didn't want to, but I was scared. I didn't know how to get out of it. I could feel my stomach twist, but it wasn't out of sympathy. It was because he wasn't sorry. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done to me. He was sorry for himself, for getting caught. The judge didn't hesitate. "All assets are hereby frozen," he announced, his voice booming across the courtroom. "The probate assessment will begin immediately. This case will be reviewed thoroughly." The weight of it hit me all at once. It was over. The judge's words rang in my ears, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. The lie they'd built around me, the life they'd tried to take from me, it was unraveling piece by piece. But there was still one more thing I had to do. As I gathered my things, I walked past Lacey and Mom, their eyes avoiding mine. I didn't stop. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Lacey stood, her eyes locked on me as I moved past, and for the briefest second, I saw her mouth form the words, "We're not done." I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just kept walking, my heels clicking on the cold courthouse floor. When I stepped outside, the sun hit my face, bright and harsh. The world felt different, like it was finally starting to tilt in my favor. The truth was out. The fight wasn't over, but it had changed. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally stand tall. The house was empty now. The furniture, the family photos, everything that had once held the weight of memories was gone. All that remained were the walls, staring back at me like they were just as hollow as the people who had once lived within them. I didn't move in. I didn't want to. I walked through the house one last time, the echo of my footsteps louder than I expected, a reminder of how little I really belonged here. I signed the paperwork, the transfer of ownership, without a second thought. The house was officially mine, but it didn't feel like it. It never would. A few days later, I got a letter from my mom. I didn't have to open it to know what it was. A plea, a last-ditch attempt at repairing whatever damage had been done. "Let's start fresh," it said. I tossed it in the trash without a second glance. There was nothing left for me to salvage there, not anymore. I walked out into the garden, the space where I used to play, where I used to feel like I was part of something bigger. In the corner, half covered by weeds, was Grandma's old silver pen. It had always been her favorite. She'd used it to write letters, to sign documents, to create all the things that had once made her the center of our family. I picked it up, the cool metal cold in my hand. It wasn't a tribute. Not this time. It was a message. I planted the pen in the soil, right where the garden began to fade into the overgrown wilds that no one had tended to for years. It wasn't for Grandma. It was for me. A symbol that everything they tried to take from me, was finally in my hands again. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their forgiveness. I moved into a quiet apartment in a new town. It was small but real. It had the kind of peace I had been missing for so long. No portraits on the walls, no remnants of a life that wasn't mine. Just simple things. An old couch, a wooden table, lavender in the window. The quiet felt like a luxury. For the first time in ages, I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's idea of who I was. I could just be. The online series I'd started about navigating betrayal and building resilience took off in a way I hadn't expected. People connected with it, shared their own stories. I started getting messages, comments, some from strangers, some from people who had been through similar battles. I realized I wasn't alone. Then one day, a university reached out. They wanted me to guest lecture on resilience, on how to rebuild your life after losing everything. It felt surreal, but it felt right. Maybe I hadn't figured everything out, but I had something to offer. Maybe the scars weren't just a sign of what had been taken, they were a testament to what I could still build. A notification popped up on my phone, a message from Lacey. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it would say. "You'll never understand what you took," it read. I stared at it for a moment, the words feeling like a weight I no longer needed to carry. I deleted it. There was nothing to understand. I hadn't taken anything. I had reclaimed what was mine.